This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, President of the Non-Threat Assassination Squad, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. Before we get started, let me tell you about GlockTriggers.com. Love them or hate them, the one thing you know about Glock pistols is that they are reliable. Out of the box, to the range, absolutely reliable. It's what makes them so popular with competitors, law enforcement, military, and responsible armed citizens. But one of the drawbacks is that stock trigger. Well, Jeff Wilson and the folks at Glock Triggers asked themselves, how do we make them better while maintaining reliability? Using stock parts as their foundation, they've refined the interaction of the metal parts to give you smoother take-up, a cleaner break, and reduced overtravel without sacrificing safety or reliability. Recommended and used by people like Bob Vogel, Travis Haley, and Ken Hackathorn, Glock Triggers custom trigger kits come with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. Visit them today at GlockTriggers.com and check out the Edge, the Vogel, the Skimmer, the Guardian, and the Hackathorn trigger systems. Use the promo code from this podcast, USC20, and save 20% off of your entire order. GlockTriggers.com. The highest quality drop-in trigger system for your Glock. Our special guest today is Chris King from Coventry, Vermont. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Well, I noticed your IDPA profile says that much like your performances at matches, you choose to remain an enigma, but here you are on Unload and Show Clear, so let's demystify Chris King a little bit. Tell us about yourself and what you do for a living there in Coventry.
I'm an X-ray tech / MRI technologist at the local hospital. Basically just X-raying people and imaging mostly.
Native to Vermont?
No, but honest, kind of, because I grew up, my father worked Border Patrol, so we grew up living all over the place. And one of the home bases where most of my extended family is from is right on the New York-Vermont border. So I grew up literally our home was within a mile of the Vermont border. So yeah, when I first moved up here, everybody asked me, because this is way northern Vermont where I live currently. I mean, again, 5 miles from the Canadian border. So a lot of people were automatically, when I told them my father worked for the Border Patrol, they assumed, oh, you're from here. He worked here. And I'm like, no, never.
So, with your dad's experience in the Border Patrol and law enforcement, did you grow up with guns in the house? Did he introduce you to guns as a kid, or was that something that was sort of verboten and you picked up later in life?
Well, I wouldn't say he introduced us like as far as handing us a gun, but I mean, I was around him with his service revolver my entire life. I mean, with the exception of the times we lived in the Bahamas where back at that time, a Border Patrolman was also immigration. It's a little different now, but when we were immigration, he didn't have a firearm, at least not that I remember. But when he was Border Patrol, which was a good number of years, there was always a revolver. He was always cleaning it. So guns were not verboten or taboo in our home. And as far as other weapons, he was a big hunter, and our family's big hunters. So I was around rifles most of my life, if not all of it.
At what point did you get interested in shooting for yourself? Did the interest in hunting continue after you grew up and left home, or was it Like I've talked to some people where it was years after, they left home that they got the bug. At what point did you decide to go out and get a gun for yourself?
I didn't buy my first pistol until I want to say like 2014 or 2015. And again, it was because living in Vermont, and I think life settled down, and I had a little more free time, a little more free money on my hands. So, and everyone I knew had a pistol, and in Vermont, you don't have to have any kind of carry permit. So it just seemed, a no-brainer to at least acquire one, just if nothing else for home protection.
Right.
And then I'm sure that many people will agree that it's like an addiction. Once you have one, they just seem to multiply.
It's right. It's like Doritos. You can't have just one.
You cannot. And in it because mostly, I started getting one or two weapons, and then my wife was looking at me like, well, do I get one? And so I said, well, absolutely.
Of course.
We got one or two for her, and now I'm needing a bigger safe.
It's like rabbits. So at what point did you bought the first handgun for home and self-defense? At what point did you find out about IDPA and competitive shooting?
Oh, I would say within the first year or two. Actually, within the first year after buying the pistol, I started looking online, especially on Facebook, getting involved in some of those groups that, SIG P320 focused groups. And
right.
I started noticing people who answered some of the same questions over again were Al McCole, Bruce Gray from Gray Guns. And I always seemed to see them discussing, was this grip legal in IDPA? And no, yes, this. And then I started seeing the USPSA side of it. And so I kind of shut down at that point and just kind of paid attention to, because all I really was trying to do was get my gun to be whatever, faster, better. And then I started paying more attention to what are these people making their guns faster and better for? Oh, they're shooting this competitive sport, and it looks pretty darn interesting. So I started asking questions, and one of the guys who I would say, he'll probably shoot me in the foot for this, but I would say the gentleman who really is bringing the local club that I shoot at back up to speed is James Lang. He noticed me asking some questions, and he, in no short time, contacted me and said, via Facebook, and said, if you're interested in this, come to our Intro to IDPA class that we host every year. He told me the date and answered a bunch of questions for me. And at that point, I had already done a pretty exhaustive amount of research, just watching YouTube videos and looking at the rule book already. So I thought, absolutely, I'll come on over. These guys will give me a great introduction.
So do you remember the first match that you shot?
I do. Actually, it was that first, the IDPA intro class was the first week in April of 2017. And then they try every year to host a April match, but the range conditions just never seem to allow for it. There's always either tons of snow still on the ground, or the snow has not gone away for long enough, and so the range is just a mud pit. So the first match that we always hold up there is in May, so that was May of 2017, and it happened to be a classifier.
Naturally.
So it was naturally. And that was back before they changed it to the 5x5. So the very first classifier I ever shot was the old way, which I was reminded over and over again that day, this isn't really the old way. The old way was 90 rounds. The new way was whatever it was, 72. And now we're down to 25.
So that you kind of answered one of my questions I was going to, that came to mind. What is being so far north, you're our first Vermonter, what is the shooting season like in that part of the country?
Well, we power through it. I mean, we hold matches right up until October, and then there is a USPSA group that shoots a little closer to home, about a 45-minute, not even probably 30-minute drive for me. I shot a couple of those matches last winter, one in February and I think one in March. I remember the one in February, it was exactly 31 degrees. But it was interesting. I mean, if you get out there with the right equipment on, I mean, the only time you're really going to be without your gloves is when you're shooting. Other than that, you've got your hand warmers in your pockets, those little heatable things. You keeping your hands warm. You get up there, you draw and you shoot for 25, 30 seconds if you're good enough, I guess. Sometimes I go like more than 40 and 50 seconds, but and then you're done and you put your stuff back on. And so the shooting season, it's not too bad. I mean, I'm jealous of those folks down in the more southern states that literally can shoot year round. That's got to be an advantage
It makes a difference. It helps. But
Yeah.
then you become sort of, then you're like me and you're sort of wussified, and it hits 40 degrees and you're like, nope, too cold for me.
Yeah. Even when there's not a competitive match going on, if there's a weekend or a day off where, the sun is out and it's 30 or 40 degrees, there's never been a time that I can think of that I have gone to the range on a day like that and found myself alone. There's always at least one other person out there that's just as crazy as I am. And oftentimes they're not competitive shooters, so they look over and they see me and with all these target arrays, and I'm doing different drills around barricades, and they always come over and say, "What exactly are you doing?"
And what do you tell people about IDPA when they ask? How do you introduce the new shooter who's out there in the 40-degree weather, 30-degree weather, who's just out there plinking or just honing their self-defense skills, and they see you, like you say, doing all these things they've never seen done before? What do you tell them?
Well, that answer to that question has evolved. When I first started, I don't know what I would have really said, but now I have a pretty standard answer of it's a game that it's a sporty game that we can play. It involves pistols, and that usually gets people's eyes to light right up. And I keep it pretty simple and tell them, it involves in the real world of how the sport is played. It's focused around a concealed carry scenario stages where you are presented with you're sitting at dinner and armed intruders, whack-a-jobs come in the house and you have to defend yourself. And they usually say,
Right.
well, that sounds pretty darn interesting.
And what division and firearm are you currently competing with? And where did you start and where are you now in terms of your favorite division, favorite firearm?
I started with the wonderful SIG P320, so that gives me the opportunity of many different platforms. When I first started shooting, I had just a compact model, so that put me in the CCP category. And that first time I classified, I was marksman, which I kind of expected, but looking back at it, I know I probably could have done better if I had practiced a little bit more, especially even though they tell you not to practice that classifier. I think I could have.
Right.
I think I could have done a little better, which was good in a way. I mean, it stuck me as marksman and it gave me a good place to start it. It presented me with a bunch of opportunities of those first larger sanctioned matches to really kick some butt and get a match bump. But as I'm sure many shooters will agree, your plan never seems to come to fruition when you want it to.
Right.
I started, once I did that with the CCP and that compact, I started asking all the right questions because several of the guys, one of the guys in my club in particular is a firearms instructor, and he was first to step up to the plate and say, I see some things that I could tweak in your shooting to make you a much better shooter. And so I, of course, said, well, fire away. What do you want me to do?
Right.
He opened my eyes to the whole longer barreled gun gives you that much more of an advantage because you've got that longer sight radius. So that kind of got the gears turning, and I quickly went out and found a caliber exchange kit to a full size 320 and the frame to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, so I guess my favorite division, I would say SSP, and I'm currently a sharpshooter. That's a story in and of itself. I wanted to, this past summer, I was still marksman, and they have the big, I'm sure, I remember when Brad Wallbrenner, you interviewed him, he mentioned Live Free or Die, which is seriously one of the best matches. And I have limited experience, but I've shot some other sanctioned matches. The amount of time that these folks put in to prop design and stage design is just phenomenal. I would compare it to nationals, and I've never been to nationals, but I've seen the videos of it. But getting back to my plan was to head off to the Live Free or Die this year as a marksman, knowing full well, and everyone around me knew full well that I was much more capable of sharpshooter than marksman. My plan was to get there and seriously clean house and get myself a match bump. But about 2 months prior to that match, I went down to that same club, Pioneer IDPA, down in Dunbarton, New Hampshire, for their local match. And I was squatted and I was just ripping it up that day. I mean, I was doing extremely well. And we got to our last stage that day was the classifier. And I found myself standing there thinking to myself, like, what am I going to do? Do I sandbag this and because at this point, even if I don't sandbag it, everyone knows that if I stay marksman, it's just going to be very, very obvious. And I just found myself, with that moral dilemma. And I thought, you know what? I'm having a really good day shooting, and I'm not going to mess it up on one stage just so I can keep that marksman. I'm going to, when that buzzer goes off, I'm going to draw my gun and I'm going to shoot as best as I can, as fast as I can. And lo and behold, when they got all done, one of the guys that was with me that had been kind of mildly heckling me that day walked back by me and he said, "You're not a marksman anymore." I said, "No, I know." I said, "I haven't been for months."
You did the honorable thing.
I did. And then looking back on it, there was many people that day that I wouldn't say it was dishonorable, but they chose to choose the lesser of moral paths, and they kept themselves where they were so that they could go on and get match bumps at some other matches. But I don't
Right.
consider that immoral. I just consider it gaming. I'm learning that
Right,
gaming
exactly.
and gaming involves a lot of things, and one of those things is if you want to game and keep yourself in one bracket and one classification, that's great. But that day I just thought I'm gonna do it the best I can.
Good for you. That's cool. So what did tell us about that match, how you did and what you thought of it, what the experience was like for that first sanction match.
Well, what I thought of it, I guess, was kind of, I guess I knew a lot about it beforehand just because the guys that I shoot with had been to it for a number of years. And I mean, and I had looked on YouTube videos and quickly saw the kind of the level of intricacy, these props and everything that involved. So I wasn't shocked by that. I think if a first timer ever walked into that match, having never shot a competitive sanctioned match, or even one of that, they probably would just find themselves standing there like I did most of the day, just with your jaw open, thinking the amount of time that it must take to put this all together. I mean, they must start planning it months and months ahead of time. But that's the thing about that club, and I think it's true of lots of clubs. I mean, if we had the kind of props and membership that this place in the Pioneer has, I mean, the people just come out of the woodwork to help volunteer. They volunteer for months ahead of time, and then the week prior to the match, they're there like from sun up to well past sundown. I mean, painting and just putting stuff together. But what I thought of it was, a very well put together match, and I mean, just stages that are so well thought out that they test every aspect of the shooter that you could possibly test. Sometimes multiple aspects in the same exact stage. And I've always been impressed that as I've started to design more stages myself, I'm always impressed that they design these stages so that it is equally fair to both a revolver and a bug shooter who have 6 rounds at a pop.
Right.
That's fascinating to me. I mean, the amount of thought, process that takes to get a stage where one shooter or another cannot say, well, that's extremely disadvantaged to a revolver shooter because, you had me shoot 6 rounds to activate a disappearing target. It's never happened because I think they put that level of thought into it.
Talk about some of the matches that you've been to, and was there a fun match or a fun stage, anything in particular, a fun or a funny memory from one of those matches you could share with us?
Well, I would say that every Live for Your Die match is memorable just because of the people, the staff that are there, the people that you're shooting with. I mean, last year I went down because it was such a fun time for me the year before. This past year, I went down basically a day early. I went down on staff day. And what reason being, my brother-in-law flies up. That first year, I told him about it. He looked it up online. He flew up from Virginia that first year to shoot it with me. So last year on my way down, he was flying in on Friday. I left early Friday morning, and I drove down, and I stopped in at the match and said, hey, I'm here early. I've got nothing to do for a few hours. You want some help? And they were like, absolutely. Head over and help so-and-so out. So I helped him out on the stage, and I shot it the next day, and then I went back Sunday after I dropped my brother-in-law off the airport. I went back again in the morning, and I volunteered again all day long. And the reason being that I volunteered was because the people that, and I'm sure this isn't just true of Pioneer, since I've gotten into this sport, every single person that I meet is just nothing but friendly and nothing but helpful. They're willing to literally give you the shirt off their back if you need it, ammunition, a spare gun. I mean, I've seen people have a breakdown and someone says, well, I don't have a backup. And someone says, well, I do. Here's a perfectly good gun that I've never even shot, and here's ammo that I know makes chrono. So here you go. And it's things like that make every event fun. The Saratoga match last year, again, my brother-in-law came up for it. We drove to it. It was their first annual. We get to this event and we walk to the first stage, and the prop design was so fantastic. They had these 4 foot by I don't know how many feet long. One of their sponsors was a graphics design company, and they had printed these very elaborate screen printouts on this paper they were using for like their walls. I mean, there was a Gotham stage that had a Batman themed stage, and the my brother and I walked up to this screen print and we looked at it we're like, look at the detail, the level of detail and resolution in this. It looked like a real live skyscraper. And shortly after like the first or second stage, I looked at my brother-in-law because I'd done my research. I knew the guys' names that were the match director, and I'd seen their names at Live Free or Die in the prior. And I knew instantly. I said to my brother-in-law, "These guys have been to Live Free or Die just because of the kinds of stages that they design and the intricacies and all the thought they put into it." I was like, "It's a no-brainer. These guys have been there." That's what I was telling Brad. I was talking to Brad one day, and I said after the match, after Live Free or Die, I said, "It's interesting to watch someone shoot an entire stage." There was the squad he was in that day with the staff. I think there was 3 or 4 of them that all were revolver shooters, and it was just fascinating to watch a bunch of revolver shooters go through. And I'm like, I still don't have. I said to one of the other SOs, "I still don't have the patience for that." And he laughed. I'm like, six rounds at a time and painstakingly slow reloads. I mean, even if you're fast, it still looks slow.
I know. And I'm foolishly thinking that I might try that this year. I will probably disabuse myself of that notion the first time I try, though.
I thought about it. Maybe one time this year I might borrow someone's revolver and shoot a classifier just to say that I've shot a classifier, in revolver. And who knows, maybe I'll amaze myself and end up buying one more weapon.
Right.
Because the only revolver that I currently have is my dad's. Well, it's not his old service revolver, but after he got out of the Border Patrol, he bought the Model 19 Smith & Wesson that were standard issue for those guys for years. And he figured, I carried one of these things around for 30 some odd years. I might as well have one. It fit his hand perfectly. So I now have that, and I brought it to a match. It was in the truck, and I pulled it out, and immediately dawned on me, yeah, this is way too long of a barrel. Like, I can't conceal this thing. They told me I could still shoot it. They said, "Oh, absolutely." But I didn't have any moon clips or speed loaders for it. And I thought, it'll be even more painstakingly slow if I have to flip this wheel open and load each one by hand. It's going to be tomorrow before I'm done.
Yeah, that's I have a friend in Mississippi who he shoots the wheel gun maybe once a year, and then there's always a corresponding Facebook picture of him with a really sour look on his face, taking all the moon clips apart and putting the gun back for another year. It's like,
I just got back from I was hesitant to mention this because of the bad outcome. I just got back this last weekend. I went down to Maryland to the Chesapeake Cup down there, which is a CCP bug and revolver match. I received my first DQ.
Oh, Lord.
I know.
What happened?
There was a stage where you had to get out of it was my third stage of the day. We had to get out of a car from the passenger side and open the door, step out of the vehicle, and step on a little pressure plate and begin shooting. Well, I've got 2 different aspects of video. Mine, I had a little camera on my hat, and my brother-in-law managed to get that second perspective from behind the car. I'm still not 100% positive, but based on what I saw in the video and what I remember happening, I think that when I got into the car, because they have you get into the car holstered, I think that when I sat down, I might have jarred the gun out of the holster part way, or maybe even almost all the way.
Oh.
And so all I remember was opening the car door, stepping out of the car, reaching down to remove my vest out of the way, and when I reached down, the gun was already in a spot that it shouldn't have been. And I went to grab for it, and as I looked down, there was that moment where as the gun was falling out of the bottom of my vest, so many thoughts cross your mind. But the first thought was, grab it. No, don't. Because that's when accidents happen. Like it's already on its way, and it happens so fast. The gun hit the ground, and then I just stood there looking at it for a second. And the next thought was, oh, my God, this is the first time it's happened to me. This is me. Everything happened so fast, and all those thoughts happened in the first 3 seconds. But the one that kind of calmed me was I knew it was over, and I was glad the gun didn't go off. And that was, it was like, and they were so apologetic. I mean, everybody, all the SOs, the MD, people on my squad were like, "I'm really sorry." And it's like, you didn't do anything wrong, and you take away everything that, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. One thing I will be sure of from this day forward is if I ever have to get into a car with a holstered weapon again, part of my pre-buzzer routine is going to be make sure that gun is in the holster completely. And as you get out of this car, wherever because your hands had to start on your knees. But my first step will from that day forward be put your hand on your holster, like put your hand on the butt of that gun and hold it in the holster. If it costs you a second,
right.
It's better than a DQ.
Absolutely.
So the rest of the day was my third of 10 stages. The rest of the day was I caddied.
Pasting targets.
Pasting targets and caddying.
Right.
And it was fun because I got down there, you mentioned earlier about being cold weather. It was unseasonably cold in Maryland this weekend. It was 31 degrees in the morning on the way to the match, and I don't believe it got much over 36 the whole day. So I'm down there with just a bunch of people. There was one other guy that I recognized. He actually shot in our squad. He's from Massachusetts, so I'm sure he was in the same boat as I was. But there were so many people that were they were like 30 degrees. It's so cold. And I'm like, it's sunny out and it's 30. I'm like, yeehaw. I had high expectations that day. I thought this is going to give me an advantage. They're not used to having cold hands. I'm going to be fine. I guess karma has a funny way of reaching around and biting you right in the rear end when you don't expect it. But I did. I had high expectations of being, one of the few shooters that was going to be able to maintain everything during the day based on the cold weather, but that did not work out for me.
Best laid plans.
Yeah. But, it's again, those things that go back to, I can't tell you how many thousands of times in 2 years I heard people say, there's two kinds of shooters, either those that have been DQ'd or those that are gonna. And so
yeah,
I got it off my list.
Exactly. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
When.
Besides your gun and holster and the usual stuff that everybody takes to a match, is there something that you always make sure that you have with you in the range bag for a major match or for a local match that you just absolutely have to have, and why?
That would be my father's dog tags.
Really?
Mm-hmm. He passed away a few years ago. He passed away the October before I really started getting involved in competitive shooting. And I just happened to, after all was said and done and the dust settled, I happened to have his dog tags. And I was thinking something one day and I had them in my hand and I thought, I'm going to throw those in my range bag as good luck. I'm looking up like, watch over me, Dad, see if I can't shoot straight today. And I've never taken them out of my range bag.
As we wrap it up, the final question, and you've kind of alluded to some of it, I think, but what is it about IDPA that you're so passionate about that you would go drive to a match, hours to a match, show up a day early and help them shoot the match and then go back the next day and help them tear down? What is it about the sport that you love so much that keeps you doing it?
Like I said, I've already alluded to the people, so that would be just restating the obvious, but it is the people. And I think in the long term, and it's already started for me, both of my kids, they see me, I'm bringing them up to be around guns, gun safety. I can already tell you that I know my daughter's just chomping at the bit to get out and shoot and eventually shoot competitively, so I'm sure my son will follow suit. But I think that's going back to the people that you meet. I want my kids to have the same kind of fun with the same kind of like-minded people that I have. And I guess I look long-term and think if I could have started shooting competitively or just shooting in general when I was 10 as opposed to 45, imagine where I would be. And so I look at my children and I think, and maybe this is a little early, but I'm thinking if they get as involved and as passionate as I am about this, then they will have their name at the top of the scoreboard at some point. I just know it.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate you taking a moment and being our first Vermonter on the show and representing the state and telling us a little about your story. I hope I get a chance to get up to the Live Free or Die this year or next and meet you face to face and shoot a match with you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It was when you first asked me to do this, I thought, geez, there's so many more people that have been doing this longer and I think I even said that to you, but then you may have responded to me or somebody else said, no. Oh no, I said it to John Wolf. And he said, absolutely. He says, your story's as good as anybody else's. So you definitely set up that appointment.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.